So I've got my Earl Grey tea, my orange juice, my Bow Green energy water in front of me. What's
I,
going to
I
happen to our image?
I just chugged down a glass of chamomile, so I'm ready to go.
I don't like stealing people's references. I always like to cite quotations, but I've said that a lot before shows before. I've listed out the different beverages and said what's going to happen to our image. That's actually a Johnny Cash reference. I don't know if anybody.
Really?
Yeah, it's a Johnny Cash reference.
Huh. I've only ever listened to one Johnny Cash song.
That's a tragedy, my friend. It's a tragedy. We have to remedy that. Anyway, if by fate and circumstance you have come across this podcast, you are listening to the Superist Show Ever, brought to you by zeninthecar.com. We are not broadcasting live, but we're recording live from the Starships Enterprise somewhere in the middle of Georgia. I think you're somewhere up in Yankee Land, though you don't
I,
want to disclose your address.
correct. I am somewhere in Yankee Land for the moment.
Somewhere in
Yes.
No, the reference is Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson did an unplugged album for VH1 back when that was a thing. And
Oh,
you got the two biggest icons of outlaw music, and Johnny Cash said something to the effect of, "I got water, tea, and coffee. What's going to happen to our image?" And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, "That's beautiful," because he did make his way into show business as an outlaw, as this wild man in black. So,
I
uh,
can appreciate that.
yeah, I keep
For-
waiting for some radio show host to call me out on the reference and go, "Is that from Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson Unplugged?"
Normalize outlaws not drinking alcohol. I'd like to be an outlaw, but I don't want to drink but I don't want to drink.
Well, Dylan, if it makes you feel any better, in my book, you are the biggest outlaw of all time.
All right.
So, for full disclosure to everyone who happens to be listening, and if you are listening in the car, which is the best method to do so, hence the title zeninthecar.com, for full disclosure, we did record the intended episode 2020 about a month ago.
Yes, and that was not our first attempt.
It was not our first attempt. I think we've actually tried to record episode 2020 5 times at this point.
Yes.
5 times.
Y-
And
We're
it's
a hot
it's
we're a hot mess over here at Zen in the Car. But after
yes.
this year, who wouldn't be?
As the kiddies say, we are a hot mess. This is true. So the intention of episode 2020 was to do a retrospective on 2020, and I mean now as of today's recording, it's March the 19th.
So we're gonna do a recap of 2020 in one quarter.
It shows how disciplined we are here at the Starship. but
Oi,
but
oi, I
but
was trying to stay on you.
yeah, I mean, but the thing is recently I've had some significant life changes, and the wonderful thing about owning things like zeninthecar.com is you get to make executive decisions and say, we're not doing that."
And that is your prerogative, and I have followed your lead and will continue to because it has not failed me so far.
Wow, you're an exception to some rules, that's for sure. Don't follow me, people.
I'll follow you on this.
Okay, follow me on this. Yeah. So 2020, man. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but I mean, everybody who's listening knows that was a doozy.
It was a doozy indeed. Um, whew. Uh, dude, this was such an exhausting year. I feel like we all aged like 5 years.
Some of us a little bit more, my friend.
Oh, sure.
I mean, and me and you have compared it to like a Netflix show because it really was like a show. I mean, you had everything from riots to all these new splinter groups that are popping up, that names I've never heard of before. You got BLM, you got Antifa, you got these Proud guys, you got, I don't know, the Snuffleupagus is over here. Everybody's got an agenda.
You got the Boogaloo Boys.
You got is that a real thing?
That is a real thing.
No.
Yes.
What's their deal?
Um, they are a fascinating group of far lefties, kind of, who have aligned with the far right, kind of, to like start an insurrection.
No.
They are genuinely the strangest splinter group to come up from the last year.
And see, sometimes since I stuck my head away from the news, sometimes I think you just make stuff up, but I gotta trust you.
Look them up. Look them
Okay.
up.
I'll do that never, but okay. But no, I mean, you had all these different, you had basically from what I'm looking at, sitting in, in my captain's chair, is a complete fracturing of the American consciousness into all these different identities.
To some degree, I think that's true.
To some degree, I think that's probably true, and a lot of it had to do with what was going on in the political sphere, which we've beat that horse ad nauseum. Everybody knows my opinion on the whole Trump and Biden thing, but that,
Everyone knows mine as well.
yeah, I mean, and that was such a lightning rod for all of these groups and all of this madness that happened in this country, or that is still kind of happening in this country. Well, it's still happening. Let's just face it. And then let's go ahead and sauce for the goose. Let's go ahead and give you a pandemic.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean, the pandemic really was kind of a national trauma. And I think to some degree, however small or however large, you can attribute every event that happened last year to the pandemic. I don't think the BLM riots happen, the BLM protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, happen as explosively as they do, if not for being cooped up for 4 months. I don't think January 6th happens if people weren't cooped up for 10 months. I maybe they still happen, but I think they'd be a lot smaller. People were just pent up. And frankly, they still are because most states are still locked down. Now, we can have a debate over whether the lockdowns were helpful or not, and I think that's a debate worth having, but you can't deny that it had a profound effect on people's mental health.
well, as above, so below, as within, so without. I know that that's got to be true on the outside world because that's true on the inside world.
Yeah.
You know, that's true on the inside world. When you, and we'll get more into it here as we go, but when you suppress or bottle up some stuff, well, that's going to ferment and bubble up eventually.
Yeah. You can only suppress yourself for so long, and it's not good because whatever explodes after you suppress yourself is going to be a lot worse than if you had just dealt with it in a healthy manner.
And we were seeing it all in our news feeds,
Yeah,
all year.
we saw the explode. We saw the metaphorical and literal explosions of people's issues that had been bubbling up.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are there any parts of 2020 that you want to dissect? Because, I mean, there's no doubt everybody knows it, even armchair psychologists like myself. We know that the massive the micro trauma is what they call it. The micro traumas that occur to us as a nation and planet during 2020 have had a significant effect and
Um,
needs to be
I yeah,
addressed. So,
it
what
does.
what parts of 2020 do you think really were the bullets?
Um, First off, I think that um the lockdowns themselves were perhaps the biggest driver of anything. Um, the lockdowns, I mean, social isolation. Look, I remember when this all started. I remember saying, "Guys, it's fine. I've done this for years. You're gonna be just fine." And I that was kind of it, I was kind of kidding and being lighthearted because that's what I do, but I genuinely believed that to some degree, and I still do because I have found ways to socialize on the internet. I have socialized myself in what I believe is a healthy manner through the internet. Perhaps that's incorrect, but it's uh, I believe that I've socialized myself in a healthy way, and I believe that people could if given the right tools, but they weren't. So social isolation, being locked in with either nobody or with your immediate family for now over a year is that's going to put a mental toll on you, and it's going to make news stories that are extraordinary, even normally, even more extraordinary.
Right, right. And you talk about the healthy use of the internet and things like that to a degree, and I'm guilty of it too, just like anybody else. You know what I'm saying? I'm a little bit more aware of it, but whenever the emergence of social media first came up, my spidey sense went off, and I was like, something's going on with this. There's an agenda. There's an agenda, and as I watched it grow, and I watched more people get involved with it, even before the lockdown with the pandemic, leading up to this, we've kind of been isolating ourselves, not really in the walls of our home, but in our smart devices to a degree.
Um,
And I've talked about, the dangers of dopamine and what, Facebook is doing with dopamine. And now, thank God, now Netflix has documentaries about it. And now
mhm.
people are talking about, this is having a very negative effect on our psyche.
Yeah, no,
Very negative.
it absolutely can. Now I have a bit of a different perspective on this, given that for good and for bad, I was raised on the internet for all the good things that brings and all the bad things that brings. From my perspective, the internet is a tool. Facebook is a tool. Twitter is a tool. It's all in how you use it. What we did, uh, and by we I mean the unconscious movements of the world, because I don't uh, I don't believe it was an agenda. I believe this was just a natural product of people. This was something that was always going to happen
No, no,
on
don't
the
get me
internet.
wrong. I'm not implying, I'm also not saying this isn't the case, that there's a room of a cabal, smoke-filled room with this cabal that was like, we're going to mind control everybody. No, that's not what I think it did naturally grow. But then, of course, consumerists, big consumers, not capitalists, but consumerists, took advantage of it,
Oh,
knowing, human
yes.
psychology, and they hijacked it.
Yes. No, that is definitely true. I will grant you all of that. But I see it as a tool. It's something that can be used in a healthy manner. But what we did was we gave people all these different tools. We didn't put any warning labels on it. We didn't include an instruction manual, and we basically said go nuts.
Pretty much. And look,
Yeah,
I mean, I have social media,
so do
and
I.
you have to.
Yeah, I mean I use Twitter probably more than I should, but I mean again, it's all in how you use the tools.
I agree. Everything in moderation.
Yeah, I use Twitter to get my news. Pe- uh, I use it to talk to people I wouldn't have otherwise talked to. I've used it to meet people I wouldn't have otherwise met.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
people are listening to us on the internet. It's a good
yeah,
thing.
yeah, the internet is a wonderful tool.
I agree.
It's the-
But but what I mean is, the part of the culture that is becoming so absorbed into it, they were already isolating themselves before
Mhm.
quarantine. And then now you took them from they're able to walk openly and do things openly. However, they're still isolated in this smart device in their hand. Well, here, they still have their smart device now. Throw them in their house and lock them in.
Yeah, it's just we are social creatures. We just are. I mean, social media might have warped the meaning of a social creature, but we still are one. You do, Social creatures can't be locked up for a year.
Yeah.
I mean, I I'm more COVID alarmist than most people. I accept that, and I accept that I'm going to have a more extreme sort of reaction.
Mhm.
But the lockdowns didn't need to be a year. We botched this. We botched it really badly. The lockdowns shouldn't have lasted a year. That has had a detrimental effect on uh, not just the economy and the functions of the country, but the functions of people's minds.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt, and the elections, the recent elections, that was it was obvious there. I mean, that was just I don't want to talk about it too much because it is what it is. I mean, when like I said, we beat that horse to death, but it's like for one, I clocked out of politics whenever Trump was announced as the front runner for the Republican Party. At that point, I just said it's all a game show. It's all a show. You literally just nominated a game show host
Yeah,
as your I
yeah.
mean, literally. Like, I'm not
You
even.
don't
It's not
get
even a.
more obvious.
It doesn't get any more obvious than
Like
that.
I don't think it's quite as much of a game. I think these are real people in a real competition, in a real contest with real stakes. I do think the elections matter, but come on. A game show host?
Well, you get the leadership you deserve. You get the
Exactly.
government you deserve.
Yes,
You
I
know,
mean, you
we
nominate Trump.
ourselves
You nominate Trump and Biden, you deserve Trump and Biden.
exactly for the apathy that's been passed to us through generation and generation of really not being involved and being more consumed with things that really don't matter than what affects your lives daily. And now you end up with this. I mean, and the whole election thing was insane because it was, election fraud and voter machines. And I'm like, dude, I was telling you guys this back in 2012 and 2008. You didn't want to hear me. You called Ron Paul a kook, said he was too old to be president. That was 2008. That dude's still kicking. You know what I mean? Like, everybody could not have been more wrong about that. But I don't want to preach on Ron Paul. I'm just saying, when you have a nation that can look at somebody like Ron Paul and say he's a kook, but we'll take Trump, that tells you where your nation's morals and heart is. you know and then it only gets worse because what do you have now? You have Biden and Harris.
Mhm.
It's like Joe Biden is the president of the United States of America. You went from a game show host to a potato like overnight. The guy's a vegetable. He's a vegetable. And then all the all of the stuff that was going on in the Capitol building and all the riots that was in DC. It's just like, man, 2020 did a real number
2020,
on
yeah.
us.
Yeah, the country suffered a traumatic event, and we are seeing the fruits of that.
And it's funny you say that, and we'll get into a little bit more. But I've openly talked about me being a recovering addict and somebody who lives with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, I don't know the guy, but I do advocate his work so much. His name is Richard Grannon. Anybody who's dealing with CPTSD that's listening, if you feel like you're lost and there's no information, go to Richard Grannon's YouTube channel. He has excellent videos. But I was watching one. I'll probably put the link to his video in the description of our video. But it's called Fortress Tutorial #1: New Maps, New Solutions by Richard Grannon. Where if you really want to get your head around CPTSD for yourself or for a loved one, that is a really, really good resource. But in it, so I'm not taking credit for this, I'm stealing this from him. When you try to describe PTSD with CPTSD, because CPTSD is such a new thing being studied, people are like, well, what's that? PTSD is kind of obvious. We've dealt with that for a long time. We used to call it shell shock. Combat veterans typically, and the difference to kind of keep it as short as I can is with PTSD, you have this big event that happens, and Richard Grannon said it's like if you go to a gun range. PTSD is taking out, a Walther 40 caliber, which is what I carry, by the way. Just saying. And you shoot the target dead center mass. It'll leave a perfect little hole right there. And that's PTSD, right? And the difference between PTSD is that rather than using a pistol, CPTSD is using like an AR-15, in that it's a bunch of tinier bullets, so to speak, in rapid succession. Okay. And those, if you aim it at the target down the way, will rip that target in two. That it's more like buckshot than a bullet. And the cumulative effect of those tiny micro traumas will end up with CPTSD. And the major difference, the way to tell is with PTSD, you have an external trigger that's identifiable. So, say a troop had an IED go off, and then he comes back and somebody drops a book, there's a loud bang, he goes into a flashback. That's an external trigger. You can identify it. With CPTSD, it is much trickier. And the thing is both correlate. So if you treat PTSD but you don't treat CPTSD, that patient's going to relapse. You have to address both. So with CPTSD, when it snuck up on me, I was like, what in the hell? But it is an internal, unidentifiable trigger because these micro traumas that happen to you through life, they're not these big events, so you don't even remember. So you literally could be in the kitchen washing dishes listening to, I don't know, Johnny Cash. And you're just as happy as, oh, if I went into a burning ring of fire, washing dishes and shit. And then you go to your laundry room, and all of a sudden, from there to there, you spiral into this emotional flashback and you have no clue what it was. So, there's a difference there between PTSD and CPTSD. So I wanted to make that clear. But I do recommend people listen to that Richard Grannon to kind of get a grip on it. Now, I was going somewhere with that.
We were talking about how the country suffered a traumatic event this year.
Right.
Yeah.
See, well, with 9/11, I'm convinced that we were traumatized with PTSD. With 2020, it's CPTSD. And maybe it's because I'm dealing with that in my own life, so I'm focused on it. But I mean, come on, man. If a duck walks like a duck and clucks like a duck, or whatever ducks do, it's a duck,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So, and the reason I kind of wanted to steer this way is because when we, in our last attempted recording of this episode, without pre-warning, you made a confession to me, and I'd like you to remake that confession.
That I've started seeing a therapist.
Yeah, that you
Yes,
started seeing a therapist.
I have started seeing a therapist.
So I want to talk about that as much as you're willing to talk about that.
Sure. I've been seeing a therapist for anxiety since the end of last year. Wherever you want to go with it, I'm willing to talk about it.
What was it that prompted you?
Um, I've always been able to rationalize through things. Um, I've always sort of been able to think my way through anxiety. But there have been there have been a few times in my life where I just couldn't think through, like I couldn't think the feeling away. And this time I couldn't think the feeling away, so I decided, all right, time to see a therapist. This is untenable.
Untenable. Good word. I
Thank
like
you.
that word. So, would you say that you have anxiety, or would you say it's more into PTSD, CPTSD land?
No, I think it's anxiety. I My anxiety was not caused by any event or any series of events or anything like that. It's just, I think, a product of who I am. I'm a chronic overthinker.
Hmm. And that causes anxiety.
Yes, and usually I can think through it. Sometimes I can't, and this is one of those times I can't.
Just one of those guys. So, but was there one? I was in therapy the other day, in group the other day, and I'd made the comparison between trauma and meteorite and asteroid hits on a planet. You know,
Hmm.
uh, was there like an event that has happened to you before you started going to therapy that was like, all right, that's the straw that broke the camel's back?
No, nothing I can think of. It was just one day. Uh, one day it's like, okay, this isn't working anymore. Um, I think it had been something had wanted to do for a while. It had been something I knew I needed for a while, but I just never made the final step. It, it's hard to make that final step and actually make the appointment, even when you know it would help.
Why? Why, Dylan?
I don't know. It's like a mental block almost. You don't want to admit, for me at least, didn't want to admit that I couldn't think through it
How
on my
come?
own.
Why
Uh,
would you not want to admit
Stubbornness,
that? Any other adjectives?
um, hard-headedness.
Okay.
Uh, I, I like to handle things on my own.
Right.
I do. It's just part of it's ironically part of who I am, considering I'm disabled and need people to help me do everything. I
Well,
like to be able to do things on my own.
yeah, it
So
makes sense. That makes
needing
sense.
a needing a therapist is like, oh, I hate this. But yeah, I need one.
Now, you do it through telemedicine, correct?
Yes, I am. Uh, I'm getting my second vaccination soon, though, so I'll be doing in-person appointments soon.
How did you go about finding a therapist?
I spoke to my primary care doctor, asked him for a recommendation, and there was somebody within uh, network that I could see.
Okay. So you've
Yeah.
been going for like a year?
No, I've been going since December.
Okay, since December. And this same thing I asked you last time. Do you find that it's helping?
I think so. Something that my therapist said, she said, I don't think you managed your anxiety until now. I think you just got used to being anxious.
Wow. It's funny you say that because I had just quoted Patrick Stewart to somebody where he says, and now this is a different emotion, but it's the same principle. He says, sometimes one can be angry for so long they become comfortable that they forget ever feeling any other way at all. It's like old leather,
Yes. And
right?
yeah, yeah. And she also said, I think if you stopped being anxious, that would actually make you anxious.
Right. That's like an addict who's been doing smack for too long, and they're like, well, if we take him off completely cold turkey, he's going to have a heart attack. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, but it's true. It's true, and as we go further, I'll get into about uh, the, the stress and the pain that we cover up with either negative emotions or addiction. Both are the same means to the same end, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we'll get into that. So okay, so for people who've never gone to therapy or anything, what happens, man? What do you do?
You just talk. I mean, the, that's all I've done so far. I've just talked. And really, for me, talking is the best solution. Talking is what I need. And it's been extremely helpful to me so far. I have a significant aversion to any medicine for mental health. Um,
Yeah,
that
ditto.
Yeah, I think that's another block for me because
That's basically a chemical lobotomy that masks the problem and does nothing to get to the root of the problem.
yeah, I want to if there is a way for me to fix the problem without needing medicine, I want to do it. That that is just how I am. If I need medicine, if we can't get to the root of the problem and we just need to mask it, okay, that's what we have to do, but that's not my ideal solution by any stretch.
But you do feel that like talk therapy has gotten you through some stuff?
It it's a, it has at least helped me contextualize some stuff.
Okay. So I would imagine, because I know this was my imagining, was that whenever you go into therapy to see a shrink, which is, you've heard the expression shrink before, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, because I've said that to somebody before. I forget who it was. I said, yeah, I got to go, whatever, a shrink. And they were like, a what? And I said, a shrink. And they were like, what's a shrink? And I'm like a psychoanalyst, a therapist. They were like, I've never heard
really.
that before. I've never, yeah. I was like, you've never heard of a head shrink before?
That's so
Anyway,
weird.
I digress. But I would imagine that a lot of people who are listening who have never went to therapy or anything imagine like you laying on a couch with some dude in a chair like Freud, and he just psychoanalyzes you or asks the same questions back. Is that how it is?
Um, no, that's not my experience. They will ask some repetitive questions, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're like one of my problems is sleep. I don't sleep great. So them constantly asking how I sleep
All right, team
just
insomnia.
makes sense. I sleep, but I don't rest.
Right. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So constantly being asked how I slept that week is just logical. It makes sense. That's a repetitive question that is necessary.
Right.
Um, I've never had the same questions over and over again where I felt that there was no point.
Hmm. Well, after your first therapy session, how did you feel like leaving the appointment?
Um, Honestly, I felt more like, okay, this. I don't know if this is helping, but let's give it some time. Let's give them some time to get there.
Okay. The other question is, let's see. I don't have these written down.
Terrible preparation. This
Yeah, I
this is
know.
why we're on recording number 5.
This is number 6, I think. And literally, I was just like, "We're recording tonight, Dylan," like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
so, so that like, what's in the car, man? We're supposed to be water. Be like water.
I thought we might have been recording about WandaVision or the Snyder cut of Justice League. Nope.
No.
Re-recording the 2020 special.
We're discovering episode 2020 of the Superist. So, what was my? Oh, uh, so did you have to shop around for a therapist?
No.
No,
No.
you look like
I got lucky.
perfect match on the first one, huh?
Yeah, I got lucky. I liked my therapist on the first go.
Are you enjoying life more, or
Um, well, okay, I've always enjoyed life. Like I've never had the problem a lot of people go to therapy for like depression. I've never and one of the first questions the therapist asked me was any suicidal thoughts, and
oh,
no, never, never. I greatly enjoy life.
right?
Greatly enjoy life.
Isn't it funny how in the same mind and body, on one hand, you can just love life so much, but then in the same mind and body, there's this monkey
Yeah.
that's like, I can't get a hold of that monkey. This monkey that just seems to be wrecking your house. Isn't that that's
Yeah,
so funny to me?
yeah. The
Because I
mind
know,
is a weird thing.
yeah, because I know, like with me, I have such a passion for things. I love life. There's so many things about life that I love. But, you know, when the shades are drawn and the doors are closed and nobody's home but me, yeah, life can get a little, yeah, funny.
Yeah, it can. But I mean, hey, we're both making positive changes in our lives. So,
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, look, and it was funny that Zen in the Car came back in 2020 through this tumultuous thing because it was like, well, we were rebuilding and kind of figuring out what we wanted to be. And we're
mm,
always going to do that. We're never going to be the same.
no.
It's always going to change. It's always going to shift and move, that's life. So that's kind of what's on the site and the podcast. But it's we wrote out 2020 pretty good, but even like, and if people go back and listen to our podcast, we were having chuckles, but here Dylan is saying that he has to go to therapy in his private life. So that says something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we all struggle. Sometimes we make our struggles obvious. Sometimes we don't. And I may be anxious, but yeah, I'm still gonna chuckle at weirdos on the internet because they're
Well,
funny. No matter
yeah,
how anxious I get, they're still funny.
it's still funny. I mean, it's kind of funny to know you're crazy and go, well, at least those people over there are crazier.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
it's comforting to be able to look at somebody and say, okay, they're crazy.
at least yeah, at least I'm not that flavor crazy.
Yeah, and it's always a comfort to know that you're crazy. Eh,
It's funny you say that. And the reason I say that is here's the thing from my point of view. Okay.
mhm.
I live in the Bible Belt. I was not raised in the church or the Baptist church or anything like that. However, through growing up in the Deep South, there is a natural aversion to psychotherapy, psychology, therapy of any type. Basically, down here, it's like that boy's demon possessed is basically where you go. Something's not
Yeah.
right, and he's got snakes in his head,
Hmm.
right? I mean, literally, when I was 14 years old, dude. No, I'm not even kidding. I was at my uncle's funeral, and the pastor grabbed the family after the funeral and told them I was demon possessed because I didn't cry at the funeral. Okay.
That's just
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
People respond to grief in different ways.
And all of the family members made absolutely sure to not tell me the preacher said that, right?
Oh
No.
no, I'm sure they all told you.
Every one of them. He said, the preacher man says you're demon possessed. Oh, great. So I wonder what effect that had on my young psychology coming up, you know.
Yeah, really.
But between that and then going into the church and studying things like, demon possession, things like that, and also having a lot of bad experiences in the past, skirting the world of psychoanalysis and psychiatry and psychology,
Hmm.
I saw a lot of people turned into chemical zombies that made me have a bad taste in my mouth about that whole world. Don't want
Yeah,
to, you
yeah,
know,
and that's fair.
fair. Okay. And even when we attempted recording 5 of this episode after you had made the comment that that you admitted to me that you weren't admitted, it ain't like you did anything wrong. When you told me that you were going to therapy, I was still a little flippant about it, right?
Yeah, and that's totally fair.
Totally fair. However, Mr. Wade, I humbly, with humility, come to you and confess to thee that I am now seeing a therapist.
Good. Like truly good. Everyone to go along with the title, everyone should see a therapist.
Everyone should see a therapist, and I'm going to tell you something. I got some bloody knees and some bloody knuckles getting to that place.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It,
No, this is gonna sound patronizing, but I swear it's not. Proud of you, dude.
are, you're proud of me?
Yeah, you got there.
Oh,
That's a big
thanks.
step.
Thanks, man. Dopamine.
Yeah.
And it's true. And God bless those around me and my support network. God bless them because I know I know I've had to pull them through some. I know I have, but it starts off with I got this. You've
Hmm.
already got. You're talking to yourself and you're like, oh man, I got a bunch of childhood trauma. But over the years with the childhood trauma, what you do is you minimize it and you go, it wasn't that bad. I
Yeah.
tuck that away in this closet over here. Oh, well, that wasn't that bad either. I'm going to tuck that in that drawer. And then, I've made it through this much stuff. And then a big meteorite hits you. And then you're like, ah. And everybody your whole life has said, you've been through so much. You're so strong. So you got to keep being strong,
Hmm.
right? You got to keep being strong because you've
But
been.
the
Go
way
ahead.
I would frame it, the way I would frame it is therapy. Admitting you need help is real strength.
Well, I mean, I'm the worst and the best of both of my parents. So,
I think that's true for all of us.
I think so. Strong as both of them put together, but just as stubborn too. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. I am. My parents are notoriously stubborn people, to almost absurd degrees, and I definitely inherited that.
I did too. I did too. And so it's like, it's been almost 3 years since my mom passed, which obviously is a traumatic event. And I jumped right into my work.
Hmm.
You know,
As we do.
even doing it, I was like, it's probably not a good thing, dude. It's probably not a good thing. You
That.
probably,
Sorry,
need to
can I
take
just
some.
say something about that?
Sure.
Because that's both such a blessing and a curse that we can acknowledge that what we're doing is probably not the right thing for us to be doing.
Yeah, but
We
it's
we have that self-awareness, which is good. We need that self-awareness. And yet we don't have sometimes we just don't have the desire of willpower or even foreknowledge to do something about it.
I think for me it was like the quick fix. It was like, okay, I know this aspirin probably isn't the best for me. I should probably just drink a big thing of water, but right now I just want it to go away.
Yeah, and that's
So,
totally understandable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, with the CPTSD, I have dual diagnosis, so it's like I'm really in a danger zone because I have, recovering from substance abuse with CPTSD, and it's like, that's a powder keg if you don't maintain. Well, over the past 3 years, I've had episodes
Hmm.
of freeze and fawn. It used to be fight or flight, but now it's freeze or fawn, where you literally, we've evolved. Certain predators evolved to where they're accustomed to seeing their prey run away. So certain prey have evolved to just stand still and not move because their odds are better than if they run. And so with CPTSD, you got fight or flight, and then you got freeze and fawn, which I was going into way more than I should have over the past few years. And it starts off nice enough, the people around you who love you and care for you, and they know that you're suffering, but they don't want to be pushy and they don't want to get in your face. They say things to you like, "Hey, you got anybody you could talk to about that?" you
Yeah.
know, they don't come out and say, "You
You
need
need to talk.
therapy."
Yeah.
They say,
Yeah.
"You ought to talk. You ought to get that off your chest with somebody," or something like that.
Hmm.
And for me, I was like, nah, I got it. I think about all the other stuff in my life, and I took care of that. I'm here. I'm where I'm at. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm good, right? And
Yeah.
then, and then it becomes this. And we're going to have an author on. He's a good friend of mine, Maurice Falling. He wrote a book called From Shepherds to Shadows. You can get on Amazon. We're going to have him on soon. But me and him, we hang out sometimes, and we're on the bridge of this enterprise, and we'll get medicated and talk about philosophy and life. He's a young black man, great father, great husband. He's a spinal cord injury. This guy's a walking miracle. He should not be walking,
Wh-
but this dude plays basketball in my cul-de-sac.
What's the book called?
The book is called From Shepherds to Shadows, the story of heroism and neurological expeditions. This guy was never supposed to walk, ever. His book is fantastic, by the way, and it's a short read, too. It's very heartfelt, very real, very gritty. This guy was never supposed to walk, ever. But he's almost like Jonathan Pangborn from Doctor Strange. It's crazy, dude. It's really crazy, but he's a really good friend of mine. He's the salt of the earth. But we talk about deep things,
Hmm.
philosophy and things. Well, he was over here, we were in my office, and we were talking about it. And I said, yeah, I broke down and finally, booked an appointment with a therapist and started seeing a therapist. And we got to talk about that. And he said, Daniel, he said, all that stuff from our past, basically this is what happens. It's like hooks that get caught in your shoulders, and those hooks are attached to ropes behind you, and those ropes are attached to cinder blocks.
Hmm.
And you move forward, and under your own willpower and your own strength, you make progress. You get down the yard
But you
until,
could get down the yard a lot faster with help.
well, as you plow down the yard, you're gaining more dirt on them cinder blocks and more weight and more weight and more weight until finally you're going to grind your gears and you're going to have a breakdown. And
Yeah.
I said, damn, Maurice, that's profound because I had just read in a book or had heard from somebody what you resist persists, what you look at dissipates. And he says, well, Daniel, man, you know what you need to do then, don't you? And I said, I need to stop and turn around and look at it.
Hmm.
And Dylan, my mind was blown after
Yeah.
that
He
because I was
he's
like,
100% right.
1000% right. And I was like, dude, we should be recording this. So he's gonna be on a podcast soon because I want to promote his book and just promote him because he's just one hell of a guy and I'm
Yeah.
honored to know the guy.
Yeah, you've talked about Maurice a lot, even just in our private conversations.
Oh,
I'm very much looking forward to finally meeting him.
Maurice is just he's great. He's the salt of the earth. I'm proud to know him, and anything I could do to help his book get out there because people really need to read his book, especially people, even you, dude. I want you to get his book because he's just got a miraculous story. It's wonderful. But
Yeah.
so we were talking about it, and so yeah, I mean, I when people were as the past few years have gone by, they're like, hey, maybe you should talk to somebody, and I'm like, I've got it. And then I have a relapse into CPTSD, and I'm out. I'm just completely zonked out. And then it's like you bounce back, and you're like, okay, I did that. I bounced back, and they're like, yeah, but you should still see somebody. And
Yeah.
then they become a little bit more insistent, you know.
Yeah. What I've come to sort of not realize is the wrong word for what I'm trying to say, but therapy isn't just for when you're feeling what you're going to therapy for. It's also for when you're not.
Right, right,
It, for me, it doesn't matter whether I'm anxious or not. I need to go.
right.
Doesn't
And
matter.
me being as stubborn as I am and as adverse as I am, I just kept shooting it down, until finally it became so unmanageable for me. And this is my story to tell. I'll be discreet because, there are people in my personal life and nobody needs to know all that good stuff.
Hmm.
But I caught myself in a position recently where, in my natural state, I'm the most chill person. Like nothing really gets to me. I always try to find the silver lining. I always try to find the beauty in everything, right?
Hmm.
It's typically not my custom to be an angry person or an aggressive person at all. Like that's not in my nature. But recently, something that really, really, really woke me up is I was having a conversation with a loved one over, something menial, whatever it was. And then they, because I'm long-winded, everybody knows that. But they were like, "Hey, can you speed it up a little bit?" And I snapped at this person in the most disgusting way. And even as it was happening, I could see myself outside of my body doing that and those words coming out of my mouth and that intense anger coming out of me. And I said, "Who is that person? Who is that person sitting right there that just did that? Because that's
Hmm.
not me. That's not who I am."
Yeah.
And that event, like even as it was happening, I was like, "What the hell?" And even, like I drive for meditation and therapy, but driving, I was like, "What? Where did that come from? What is that? That is not me." And made a lot of poor decisions as a result of not attending to this mess and hurt some people, you know, to my detriment. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I, I
Hopefully you were able to rectify it.
well, life is rectification, so life goes on. But it was like at that point, I said to myself, "Dude, this isn't this isn't something you can white knuckle anymore, and this isn't something you could say I'm fine with anymore, or I have to live with it anymore, or maybe it needs to change anymore."
It
I
needs
came
to,
to,
yeah.
yeah, I came to that place where I said, "This is coming to a screeching halt right now, absolutely right now."
Hmm.
That like Maurice said, I can't carry any more of this cinder block. So at that point, I basically, people had been whispering to me, "Hey, dude, drop your pride, man, and go to therapy. It's okay. It's okay. Drop your pride."
You dropped your pride.
They kept whispering it, and I had to have my support network actually, with a booming, thunderous voice of God, scream it to me. You know, "Daniel, you are not God." And there was this mirror in front of my face of absolute pride, of pride in, making it as far as I've made it under my own steam. You know what I mean? And I'm like, "But dude, that's wonderful. But look what it's turning you into."
Hmm.
It's turning you into that guy that just snapped, or, getting angry. And then that's another thing, is the reason I wanted to re-record this is because going back and like listening to our podcast. Now I'm proud of our work. It was great work. It was fun work. But I'm angry in those podcasts, man. Like I can hear toxicity spewing out of me and just anger. Even listening to it this past week after, a couple therapy sessions, I'm like, "Dude, I'm kind of bitter." You know what
Oh,
I
yeah. I mean,
mean?
I think a little bitterness is warranted, but yes, I see what you mean. And bitterness is unnecessary in the grand scheme of things.
Unnecessary. And then I felt, a little bit ashamed of myself because I was like, "Man, dude, when you started Zen in the car, it's supposed to be about peace and mellowness and calming people down. And listening to yourself over the past year, you have added to the insanity of this world. And that's wrong of me. That was wrong. So anybody that I hurt, I sincerely and humbly apologize. You can tell me to go fornicate with myself repeatedly with my phallus if you like. But from the bottom of my heart, if I added any stress to your life, I really do apologize." Which is why, and Dylan, I even thought about going back and going, "Well, I'll just delete all that stuff." But then
I,
I said, "No, I'm not going to do that."
No,
because
it's important for look. Uh, I largely agree with you. I think most of the work was uh, had a bitter tone to it, but I think it's important to keep it there because it shows growth, and
exactly.
it's still you you can't erase the past, and you shouldn't want to.
Right. And that's why I said, nah, I'm going to leave it right there and just build on top of it. That way, people will be able to see the growth and be able to see what therapy looks like. Because honestly, after going to my first therapy session, Dylan, I'm not going to lie. Oh, man. For one, because me and you probably both suffer from smart ass syndrome, which is you can't be,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you can't be completely immersed in a process if you're analyzing the process at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Mm.
and I admit it, I suffer from smartass syndrome. But when I hit my breaking point where I was like, no, man, I'm not going to lose another loved one to these things. I'm not going to lose another trip to wherever. I'm not going to lose another business opportunity or creative
Yeah.
opportunity because of this. I'm done with it. When I finally got there,
Yeah, I had something similar. I'm not gonna go into the details, but there was something that happened with someone close to me, and it the moment the situation ended, I thought that was the worst way I could have handled that. This
yeah.
needs to change.
Yeah. How does your foot taste, buddy? Because I know how mine tastes. It's a bitter one, buddy. I said some stuff I shouldn't have said, and I humbly apologize. I sincerely do to anybody I've ever hurt with any of my toxicity. Wasn't nothing
Yeah.
personal,
And it
but
wasn't even like bitterness on my part. It was just I take a lot of I, I analyze everything. I have a very hard time trusting people.
I feel you. I feel you.
Very hard time trusting people. And
Well,
that's something I need to work on. It's something
well, I've
continually working
yeah,
on.
I've tended to be critical. I mean, and it's okay because I come from the Southern Baptist thing, so it's like I have that fire and brimstone in me. So it's like, dude, you know how to fight when the fight is necessary, but you've been fighting some unnecessary fights, you
Hmm.
know. And what's funny about it is today I had a therapy session today. My therapist said, he said, you have a wonderful radio voice. And I said, really? I've been told that before. I said, thanks. And after we got done with therapy, I said, it's a gift for me to have the ability to communicate the way that I do, and I've been abusing it.
I see. I always hate my voice. People say I have a good radio voice. I hate the sound of my own voice.
Well, we all do too. Like when I'm editing and I have to listen to us over and over again, I'm like, God, I wish I would shut up. You
Yeah, whenever I go back and listen to our old archives, I skip any segments where I'm talking a lot.
but Uh, but yeah, so when he told me that after therapy, when I was deflating from it, I was like, man, it is a gift that I have, that God moves through me to use that, and I've been abusing it, and I have such a capacity for knowledge retention and being able to break it down for laymen, like as Dr. Barnhouse used to say, get the hay out of the loft and put it on the ground where the cows can get at it. Like I
Mhm.
have that gift, and I've been desperately searching for, at home remedies and any type of therapy. I mean, I've even built a sensory deprivation tank in my house to do therapy on myself for CPT. This is how desperate I am to get this demon out of me, right? So it's like, dude, you have all this knowledge. If you need to stop adding insanity to the world and start using your platforms to help people heal
Yeah.
with what you know and what you can do. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So But but I still want to leave the aggressive ones up because I want that logged. I want that there, But moving forward, yeah, we're shifting gears as we always knew we would, and we're going to be
Yeah.
moving more towards I don't know, trying to patch folks up, man. But I'll tell you
Yeah.
this, um, talking about smartass syndrome, when I got to that breaking point, I said, all right, I'm going to, and I'm not being paid by these guys at all, anybody, but I want people to get as much help as they can. I was like, now the person that I snapped at, by the way, it was after me and you had attempted the other recording, and I said, well, Dylan's seeing a therapist, you know, and
Hmm.
this person has been very much encouraging me to get a therapist, and I was like getting more and more stubborn about it to the point of anger where I was like, I don't want to be perpetually broken. I'm not going to therapy. Just because Dylan's going to therapy doesn't mean I got to go to therapy. But then again, I got to thinking about it. I was like, well, Dylan's one of my heroes, though. Like, I respect Dylan. I look up to Dylan, and Dylan said it's doing him good. What's my problem? You know what I mean? So I was like, well, well, I respect Dylan. Dylan's got more challenges than me physically, and he seems to be a chipper guy, and he says therapy's working. So what's my problem? You know? So I went to BetterHelp.com. Okay.
That's actually where I went there for briefly before I was able to get a therapist through
Well,
my doctor.
speaking of AI, it's funny when your support network saying, "Hey, maybe you should talk to somebody," and then other people are outright telling you, "You need therapy, dude."
You
And
get
then
recommendations for it on your social. Yeah.
yeah, and then on your news feed, all you see is BetterHelp.com, BetterHelp.com. So
Oh yeah.
I was like, screw it. So I went to BetterHelp.com, I mean, I just vomited on the screen, which was painful to do. It was painful to put all that there. So
But can I take a guess that after you did, you felt a little bit better?
Not at first, no, because then you get the we're gonna match you with a therapist for 20,
Yeah.
so wait 24 to 48 hours. So for 48 hours, I had like one of the biggest spiritual battles of my life because I was like, oh God, I'm gonna be sitting there gonna talk about all this stuff I don't want to talk about, blah, 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 you know,
I
and
understand. I when I first started, I thought, do I really need this?
yeah, it's like,
I've been doing this my whole life. I can do it.
I
I
can
can.
do it. Come on,
Yeah.
Spider-Man, come on, Spider-Man.
Uh, but once I got in the room, it's like, nope, I need this.
Well, and you talk about you lucked out. They matched me in 48 hours, or it was less than 48 hours. They matched me with the absolute perfect therapist on the first go round. I
Yeah,
mean,
my
this,
therapist with BetterHelp was great too.
yeah, he is fantastic. I mean, he's a faith-based He's got more letters after his name than a can of alphabet soup, which doesn't impress me. But I mean, letters after a name don't impress me. The proof in the pudding is what impresses me.
And
And
and he's got the proof in the pudding.
this man, Dylan, this doctor, after one session, okay, and with smartass syndrome, when I sat down in front of the monitor, I said, "Okay, dude, knock it off. Sit down, put your pride down, and for once in your freaking life, will you listen? Just listen and trust, right?" And this man immediately, I mean, one, he's like me, he's bald with a goatee. So,
Mhm.
and and it's a nationwide thing. And just coincidentally, he happens to be in Georgia, just an hour away from me.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, and he goes to like the same recovery groups that I go to. So I was like, after the first session with him, at the end of it, I said, well, doctor, doc, brother doc, whatever,
But the doc.
brother doc. I think that's his new nickname, brother doc. But because I said, everybody told me I was going to have to shop around for a therapist, but I got news for you. We're married. Okay. It's like, we are married. And, but I'm going to tell you,
Your lady might be upset about that.
I don't know. But after that first session, when I got out of there, I am not going to lie. And I hope that me relaying this information and preface this, okay, before I go on any further, just don't let me forget where I was going with it. Couple years ago, I was under some extreme stress with work and everything, and people looking up to me and coming to me for advice and yada yada. And I got a brother, Ace. He's my brother. He's like my second father, but he's one of the few people that I've ever let see me vulnerable. You know, and I remember saying, I broke down crying a little bit, and I said, I can't let these people see me bleed. I can't let them see me bleed. And he just grabbed me and he said, yes, you can. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, we,
And
we can handle it.
yeah, well, I mean, and that seed, he planted the seed, but it finally started to bloom here recently where I'm like, I need to let people see me bleed, man.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I have such a heart for people. Always have. And I believe that a part of my purpose here on this planet is to alleviate suffering. Now, through creative work, I do it because I make people laugh or I entertain them through novels, and that's a relief from suffering. But even in my private work, I'm constantly trying to alleviate pain for other people. That's what I have a passion for. I don't like to see people in suffering,
Hmm.
emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever. I don't like to see it.
Um,
It's my intention with relaying my vulnerabilities and my story of entering into the path of recovery. Because not only did I start seeing a therapist, Dylan, but and when you say 12-step groups, most people the first thought is AA
mm,
or Narcotics Anonymous, which used to be mine too. But there's 12-step groups for everything you could imagine, from food addiction, sex addiction, CPTSD, anxiety, codependency, narcissism. There's 12-step groups for everything, because
mhm,
whether it be an emotional disorder or a chemical addiction, it's all trying to accomplish one thing, and that is to suppress pain and stress that you're not addressing.
mhm.
It's just manifests different. That's all. But
Yeah.
it's an escape from pain, whether you're drinking or doing smack or doing meth, or you're developing CPTSD or social anxiety. It's all the same thing. It's all trying to suppress stress and not address the pain. That's
Hmm.
what it is.
Hmm.
So with talking about this, it's my intention that, I know that there are people out there who have some sort of respect for me and kind of see me. I talk to a lot of patients daily who kind of look at me as invincible and bulletproof. And I wish that were true. I really wish that were true.
Hmm.
But when I'm dealing with them and I'm listening to their problems, somehow or another, I shut off my own problems. And so that's even kind of an addiction, because I go into superhero mode where I don't think about my things, which is a good thing to a degree.
Yeah, you mend your own, you suppress your own pain by telling yourself that the pain of the people you're helping is more important.
Right. And it's like, uh, I finally come to a point where everybody's been trying to tell me, you got to take care of yourself. Take care
Ca-
of yourself.
So this was from a totally different context, but I feel like it's applicable here. I
Hmm.
was talking to a friend today, and I said, and she had a problem that she needed advice on, and I said, you as a person have a limited bandwidth. You need to help yourself before you can help other people to your own detriment.
Right. Yeah.
You need to be in a stable place.
And I've heard people say that to me so many times, but it's like I just something. It's like that does not compute.
I, un-
Yeah.
I understand. Believe
Yeah,
me, I do.
that does not compute. But so not only am I seeing a therapist, but I was like, okay, I've been to meetings before, AA meetings and things like that, and gotten my chips and had some sobriety and all of that. But I said, but dude, you've never actually went through the actual 12-step program before. Like, you've been to meetings, you've gotten your chips, you've had long-term sobriety, but you've never really done the 12 steps. So I was like, well, you know what, dude? I've already humbled myself and said I need a therapist. I'm going to do that too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Good.
so you go into those, and for one, my experience in those rooms, for it was like you're sitting with other men, and then you get to vomit it out, and then you hear their vomit, and you go, oh, I'm not so different. I'm not so alone. And I looked around at the faces in that room. Like last night, I go to any meeting I can now, but I saw my own face at different phases in my life, and the needle was in the vein, Dylan. I said, well, I know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to go do this, the 12 steps, and then go into drug counseling for men, and coping with CPTs. I mean, I already know it. It's like God wrote it with his finger. That's on my heart, is that field. And because my suffering has to mean something. It has to count for something. I refuse to
Mhm.
believe that God allowed me to suffer for nothing.
Well,
Right?
yes. No. Okay, I don't have the same necessarily spiritual belief that you do, but no suffering, I believe, no suffering is meaningless.
No.
All suffering has meaning, and that meaning is whatever you choose to make it mean. You've chosen to make it this. You've chosen to make it something that helps you help other people get through it.
Right,
And that's a good thing. Some people don't choose that path.
right.
Suffering is whatever you make of it.
And of course, and then we'll wrap this up, but I want to segue into this. You talk about spiritual beliefs, when you get into 12-step programs, they talk about, the first thing you got to do is have this thing called a higher power. And so me, you
Mm.
know, I I started off with the Baptist church, so God to me was Zeus, angry, pissed off, just gonna shoot lightning bolts at you, God. So then I went into the occult and messed around with witches and warlocks and sorcerers and learned a lot of stuff, and it was useful. And so now I'm like, okay, well, dude, you got to get into a 12 step. You got to get a therapist. You walk this path. I'm like, okay, I got to do that whole higher power thing. You mean God. So thanks for listening to the Superist Show Ever, episode 2020, part 1. The conversation does continue in episode 2020, part 2, where Dylan and I go a little bit deeper into trauma and anxiety and reaching out for help and all those sorts of wonderful things that nobody wants to discuss these days. If you like what you heard, make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends, all that good. You know how it works. If you happen to be suffering from PTSD or CPTSD or any other emotional mental disorder such as addiction, I do highly recommend that you visit the YouTube channel Richard Grannon Fortress Mental Health Protection. He has a video series called Fortress Tutorial that is just a wonderful resource for you to sit down with maybe loved ones who don't quite understand what you're going through and watch this video series so you can kind of get a handle on it. A lot of times knowledge is curative. So I highly recommend that. He also has a wonderful free ebook on his Instagram called How to Stop an Emotional Flashback that I recommend for anyone dealing with this sort of thing. We also mentioned the book From Shepherds to Shadows by Maurice Falling on Amazon. Please pick this book up. It's a miraculous story about a titan of a man that has pulled off the impossible. And he's a great guy. We're going to be having him on pretty soon. But pick up his book From Shepherds to Shadows, and the links for all this stuff will be in the box below. You know how it goes. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. And don't forget that we also are affiliated with the CannaSense Total Wellness Medical Cannabis Collective. If you're seeking medical cannabis, regardless of what state that you're in, and you don't have access to it, go to cannasense.com, click on Become a Member, pick your plan, and just put in Daniel Lewis Crumpton or Zen in the Car in the sponsorship form, and give us 24 hours. We'll validate you in. You'll have access to our apothecary. So we do hope that you check out these resources. We hope that something we said maybe touched you, maybe made you feel like you weren't alone. And check us out on the next part. Stay well.